Welcome into another episode of Inside Bassmaster Podcast, episode 71. I'm your host, Ronnie Moore, and my co-host, Kyle Jessie, digital content editor for Bassmaster.com. What's going on, Kyle?
Not much. Enjoying the nice spring weather that we've had here for the last few weeks and hoping that it continues on to the Chickamauga Elite Tournament, but it may not be the case. It's looking like might get a little cold on us.
Well, I know that you've taken advantage of a couple days off in between events. You obviously worked Santee Cooper, then you hung around there in South Carolina, and you went up to North Carolina, did the college event there at Lake Norman, and then obviously got home and took a couple of those comp days that we get for working on weekends, and you went bassing and caught some, and it does feel like spring. We're recording this on Sunday, April 3rd, and it's previewing Lake Chickamauga this week for the Bassmaster Elite Series and a little bit of recap talk of other events that have happened over the last week or two. And a lot has changed in my life over the last few weeks and in the fishing world as well. We've had a couple events, including the college event at Lake Norman, the Open at Cherokee Lake, which was up and down with weather as well. And so it does feel like spring has sprung, though. Sunday afternoon, it's been 70 degrees or so all day here. I've got pollen on the boat, and I've been rigging up some rods because I'm going to go to a nice little honey hole on Monday with Mark Zona as he comes into town for Chickamauga. So for the viewers at home listening, you will have Mark Zona in studio messing with Tommy Sanders, myself, and Mike Sukon this week for the Elite Series event. Obviously have all our guys, Dave Mercer, Davey Height, and the rest of the crew on location there in Dayton, Tennessee. And you'll be there as well. But you went bassing today, and it feels like it's spring, but the fish, they don't just rush up there like we think they do. They're still kind of waiting to get into spring mode, even in Alabama.
For sure. We were just talking about that, is the fact that you want the spawn to be happening so bad, everything sets up right, but there's so many factors, for fish to get up there and stay up there. And it seems like every spring, naturally, you're going to have some inconsistent weather, water levels, water temperatures. I mean, it's always inconsistent. Sometimes I think it's a mixture of me just not being able to see them or find them, or maybe they're just not there yet. But yeah, it definitely feels like spring, and it's definitely got me really excited, looking forward to the next time I get to go. I typically, I've told you this before, but more often than not, most tournaments that I go to and cover don't really make me want to go fishing any more than normal. But the last few that we've had have made me want to fish so bad that I've fished the last 2 days, then I've fished on Thursday as well. So 3 of the last 4 days. So I've definitely enjoyed that for sure.
Yeah, it's when I'm thinking about Lake Hartwell even, and I'm a dock fishing guy. I just love docks. You grew up on Lake Hamilton, which is just full of docks. I grew up on Lake Norman, which you saw that is just full of docks. So I love that. And so Lake Hartwell for the Classic had me excited because there's some great topwater bites to be had. A jig on a dock, that's a great one. I love a chatterbait bite. But man, when you skip a wacky rig or you're fishing walkways of docks and you get on a dock pattern like that and you can call your shot, that gets me so fired up to go bass fishing. So to see Jason Christie do that and some other guys fishing docks, that had me fired up. But then also I got to take in Santee Cooper just a little bit. I watched a little bit of coverage on day 1 of that event. And then I watched about half the day on day 3, which was Sunday. And then day 4, I watched it as well. And the deal is, when they're biting at Santee Cooper, that's the place to be. And we got to see that with Drew Cook and Caleb Kufal duking it out on the final day. We had 4 anglers over 95 pounds, and we had 2 anglers break the century mark. Drew Cook getting his first Elite Series win. So yeah, Lake Hartwell, that's just my DNA. That's my type of fishing, and I love it. Santee Cooper, hey, I love sight fishing as well. I do know it's a lot harder at times with cypress trees and grass to really get on them. So I don't blame some guys for not being around them as much, but some of those bodies of water they just scream, let's go fishing. And especially with the trees blooming, I mowed my lawn on Saturday, and even though it's partially dead, but it's wanting to come alive, weeds are definitely alive. It gets you in the spring mode to burn your grass down and let it come up with the rains over the next couple of days. So in Arkansas, though, we talked about it. You mentioned it a little bit about how these fish sometimes just aren't ready yet. And that's going to be something we will see maybe at Lake Chickamauga this week. Will the spawn happen? And so I always say it, since I've lived in Arkansas, you could have the best weather ever in March, and they just will not spawn because we will have one big rain that floods the given rivers and lakes or dirties it up, or, like the Lake Ouachitas and stuff. you could have a big rain and the water level go up 5 feet. In the Arkansas River at Dardanelle, I have sworn off fishing Dardanelle before April 1st, because in March you'll get one cold rain and it'll be chocolate milk and 47-degree water temp somehow. And a week later it's cleared up and it's 60-degree water temp. So it's just so volatile. But in Arkansas, it seems like as soon as it hits April and you've got a 3 or 4 day stretch of 70+ degree weather and not cold temperatures at night, you're going to have fish on the bed. So I'm excited for maybe the fish in this state will be doing it. But I will say to you, at Lake Chickamauga, the deal is they don't start raising the water to summer pool. They have a winter pool in the Tennessee River and a summer pool in the Tennessee River. They don't start raising it at Chickamauga until about April 15th, and they use all of April to slowly move it up. That's why we've seen John Cox win opens in May. Sight fishing, you think maybe, man, it's been a month. They should not be good on the bed still in May enough to win an event, but they're just getting settled in there for the most part, at least a good wave of fish. So we may see a wave come up, though, this week with weather, because it looks like even though it's low, it's about 3 feet low from summer pool and about 3 feet high from winter pool. So it's dead middle. It's about 6 to 7 foot fluctuation. And so it is dead middle of where it should be water level wise. I don't think they're going to drop the bottom out back to winter pool. I think we're close enough to April 15th. They're going to just sustain it and then let it rise a couple feet over the next month. So that's a lot of info. But yes, this time of the year, especially on Chickamauga, I'm thinking it's less about water temperature and it's more about water level. And you can probably attest to that on a place like the Coosa River, which is where you live nearby now.
Yeah. So, yesterday I fished Logan Martin, which is kind of the same deal in Hamilton and Central Arkansas near you now. Is the same way. They don't raise the water until a certain time period. They just started raising it on Logan Martin, but it was weird. The water's not noticeably up compared to the winter pool, but you could go back in areas where, the water's in the mid 60s. You're thinking there's got to be some fish back here. Like, even if it's not the biggest wave, there's got to be something to be seen or caught. And they're just not there because they have that internal clock and that, that want for the water to be up to spawn in those places that right now are dry land. And it makes a huge difference. And we're obviously going to get into some fantasy fishing, but what's crazy about it and kind of hard to guess or, estimate is it going to be mostly pre-spawn, mostly spawn, a mixture of the two? It really becomes tricky because, some guys, I mean, we know who they are, just have a knack for being able to find them. So like if there's any fish to be found on beds, they're going to find them. And they're, we'll certainly see some of that, I'm sure. But yeah, it definitely gets tricky with water levels because those fish don't want to spawn until it's time.
Yeah, and I mean, we can even attest to it. And like I said, it's been a busy couple of weeks for both of us. But I will say that last year in Arkansas, I saw a delayed spawn. I mean, in June, even some fish were spawning, and even some, I hate for this terrible joke, but I was even spawning in June. And so that's what the last couple of weeks have been, is that we got to welcome, me and Sarah got to welcome our daughter into this world. And we did that during the week of Santee Cooper. And so that's been super cool as well, catching up with everybody. We got to talk to Drew Cook, and he's a new dad as well. He had Finn just a little while ago as well. And so that is something that's really cool. And I will say I'm a little tired right now. It's obviously an adjustment period, but I love Bassmaster Live. I don't even want to go into work. I want to find somebody to work for me in my role for another couple weeks and just stay at home, because every day is a new day. And so being a new dad is super cool. I'm just going to show my generic hoodie that just says Rad Dad. I haven't proven that I'm a rad dad yet, but we're working on it. So very excited about that. But Kyle, you've got to go fishing. I've got to go change some diapers. We're celebrating poop in the Moore household. When the baby actually has some good bowel movements, we celebrate that. And so a little bit different than I'd expect our lives to be, but you're still catching them. And I get to go catch them tomorrow, like I mentioned. So it's good times in the Jessie and the Moore household. And so we're just going to jump right into it. Like you mentioned, we're going to get into fantasy fishing, and we're going to do it for both Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing, which is our 5-man team, and then also for Drain the Lake. Now, Kyle, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, and I'll give you my info if you're still gathering yours. But I did decent. I did decent at Santee Cooper, and was able to move up just slightly in both leagues respectively, I think. Let me check on my leaderboards. But when it comes to fantasy fishing, I had 1,067 points at Santee Cooper, which isn't too crazy. It's my second best tournament of the year compared to the Classic, but I will say not too shabby overall. What did you have at Santee Cooper?
Santee Cooper, I had, let's see, 1,102.
So you got me by about 40 points. Yeah.
I've been really consistent this year. I haven't had any, crazy good tournaments, but I've had had over 1,000 in every tournament, which I've found in the years of playing fantasy fishing and many years that basically as long as you can keep over 1,000 points in every single tournament, you're definitely going to be in the 90s and, have a chance to have one of those breakout tournaments. So right now I'm sitting pretty well right now. 94% in Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing. So I'm pretty pleased with that, hoping to keep it on the upward trend.
Yeah, you've got a couple. You're pretty consistent. You had 1,061, 1,061, and I had 1,006 and then 941. So you got me by about 250 points in the first two events combined. Then you beat me by about 80 in the Classic, which was also your best event, and then you beat me by about 40 this week. So in total, I'm about 260 points behind you, which is very doable. I can make that up. But we are both chasing, and I think the most of the world is chasing Mr. Tommy Sanders. He is owning our group. He's got 4,879 points overall for the year, and he is 22nd in fantasy fishing the world. He has tried to take, and he successfully is taking the king of the fantasy fishing role for Bassmaster Life. 22nd overall, 99.9 percentile. And he, Kyle, I believe, won all of Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing for Santee Cooper. Number one overall, Tommy Sanders. And he said in studio last week, and it wasn't even close, Ronnie, I beat the next person by 20-something points. And he almost had a perfect team. I am about tired of Tommy Sanders taking my shine in so many ways.
That was the craziest thing. So you are indeed right. He won the overall tournament for Santee Cooper. And as you know, I write a recap story for every single event as far as fantasy. Here's the best pick, second best pick. Here's the lowest scoring angler, the winning person. It has a lot of information. And I had no idea until I started writing that story that Tommy had won. I sent you a Snapchat and I said, are you kidding me? Tommy Sanders was one pick away from having a perfect team and also, like you said, destroyed the rest of the competition.
And so, 20 doesn't sound like a lot. 20 points doesn't sound like a lot, but normally at the top, you've got 6 or 7 guys within 3 or 4 points, and most of them have the same team. But him beating them by 20, he had the best pick in every bucket, except he had somebody in place of Brian New.
Yeah. So
or vice versa. He had Brian New and it was somebody else in that bucket. But not to get off on a Tommy Sanders tangent, but yeah, showing off.
He deserves some credit. Let's be honest.
We got to show him some love for sure. I know he's a big podcast listener, so I know he's gonna definitely be hearing this one about 15 minutes into our start of our podcast. But yeah.
So he had Brian New, but Brandon Cobb was the was the only person he didn't pick that would have made the perfect team. So
and I think
really incredible.
New got 12th and Cobb got 6th or 7th, so it was close over there. And then the one that really matters is Mercury Drain the Lake. Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing matters. It definitely does. It's the original version, but my favorite version, because this is the one I excel at and I'm better at, is Mercury Drain the Lake. And I was 74.4% for Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing. 74.4%, not too bad, but I'm just in the top quarter of the world in that. And in Mercury Drain the Lake, though, I'm in 94 percentile. I'm at 7,357 points. I had some pretty good events. My worst event was obviously the first one, and we both talked about this religiously, that I went a little conservative at the St. John's, and it hurt me. But I've gotten better almost every week. I had almost 2,000, and I had 2,500, and then I've had 1,600 last week at Santee Cooper, last event. And I'm still just behind Tommy there. He's rubbing it in my face. I'm about 175 points behind him there. but he started out 600 points better than me in the first event. So I've just been slowly reeling him in. This is a marathon, not a sprint. It's a marathon. So I'm trying to catch up. I'm at 94% now.
And you can make up a lot of ground in Mercury, Bassmaster Drain the Lake. That's the easiest one to make up a lot of ground, because you pick the winner for a couple tournaments and there's an extra, 100 points, or, double the winner's points back to back. So it's easy to come back. But you and I are still on the same train of my Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing is 94% versus your Drain the Lake is 94%. And then my Drain the Lake's decent at 90.4%. But
you made a big jump thing, because you were down in you slid down.
I was in the 80s before last tournament, and then I jumped up a little bit, and we'll get into it when we get into our picks. But I was also very conservative in some of the tournaments, which certainly hurt me, off the jump. But once we get into my picks this week, you'll be like, wow, he has saved a lot of guys, because I have not used some of the heavy hitters. And it's getting to the point in the season where you're talking about the early springtime events transitioning to, Fork in May, it's going to be obviously some offshore stuff, and then transition to smallmouth fisheries and things of that nature. So I'm to the point where I got to use all my shallow water hammers in the next, this event, or probably the Mississippi River. So I'm swinging for the fences. We'll see how it works.
We've got some guns left for sure. And so let's just get into our Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing picks now. Our 5-man teams, which you can pick if people are wondering, if they're just watching for some reason, they clicked on this and they're wondering about fantasy fishing. The Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing 5-man team, you can pick the same guy over and over throughout the year, depending on what bucket they're in. And they're kind of separated out in the top 19 or so. Basically, there's almost 100 Elite Series pros, and there's 5 buckets. So it's just a little less than 20 anglers per bucket. I think it's 19 for most, and then 18 for the last one. So it's about 20 guys per bucket. You pick the angler, and it's based off Angler of the Year standings. And you can pick Greg Hackney in every event if you want. You can pick Patrick Walters in every event if you want. Whoever it is, you can do that. And just decide depending on which bucket they're in. But for Mercury Drain the Lake, the difference is once you pick an angler, you can't use them again. And that's why I liked it as my game mode of choice, because it's more strategic. You have to use 80 of the 94 anglers in the Elite Series if you want to, and you got to play around when you choose them, because once you use them, you lose them. And so let's get into our Rapala 5-man league picks, and I will let you go first for your bucket A. We did not disclose any of our picks prior to this, so we will see if we match up in any. But bucket A at Lake Chickamauga, after 3 Elite Series events, this is the top 19 anglers in bucket A is in the top of your Angler of the Year standings.
So in bucket A, I'm going with a hot hand, one of the hottest hands, I guess second hottest in the Elite Series, being David Mullins. The aspect of, or the potential of there being a pretty major pre-spawn bite still happening really has me excited for Mullins. Also, obviously a Tennessee guy, has had plenty of success on the Tennessee River. You'd have to think has probably fished Chickamauga quite a bit in his early on years. I just like the prospect of David Mullins not being one of the 2 highest picked anglers in the bucket. I want to say at the time he was somewhere in the 10 percentile range, 9.5 right now. So at 9.5%, I'll take that. Obviously, there's 2 guys eating up a giant portion of the percentage in bucket A, being John Cox and Buddy Gross.
Rightfully so.
I was about to say for good reason, but I'm just going to roll the dice and go against the grain on bucket A with David Mullins.
Yeah, I like that pick, and that's the kind of a similar train that I was going on. I didn't pick Mullins, but I thought about Mullins because he is an East Tennessee guy. He does like throwing a swim bait and likes cranking. And so I wonder if some of those bars, those shallow ledges on Lake Chickamauga, that might be the staging place for these fish, because it's not up in the bushes and it's not up to some of the docks. It's going to be 3 feet. It's about 3 feet low. So I will say that not all the cover up on the bank is there. It might not be the best spawning opportunity for fish. So some of those little stops, those little pit stops on the way to the shallow grounds where they'll spawn on the main river, or even in a creek, those are going to be the places that you want to look for. And so David Mullins is a great pick. I'm going on a similar train, though, with Brandon Lester. I think with 4% for Lester, I think it's highly underrated. This time of the year, to be honest, this season, to be honest, his career, very underrated angler. And I think that he's got a good momentum train going as well. Obviously, he's in bucket A because of his performance for Angler of the Year, but Brandon Lester is great on river systems as well. I would expect him to know kind of how he should navigate and target and kind of plan out his week at Lake Chickamauga. And let's face it, if they do get up there and spawn, he's not going to be afraid of that either. He's also got a great track record at Chickamauga, I believe, in the opens as well. Different kind of playing field with 200 plus boats. Sorry, I'm just going to name drop. Mark Zona's texting me asking if I need a pin to the ramp tomorrow where we're going. I do not. Let me text him back. But yes, bucket A, you went David Mullins. I went Brandon Lester. I know we normally alternate, but I'm going to need you to go first for bucket B.
Fair enough. So bucket B, about the same percentage that I went in bucket A. I'm going with Chris Zaldain in bucket B. The prospect of a big swim bait bite being a major key in this tournament. Obviously, Tennessee River lakes are notoriously known for big swim bait fishing. The forage is really big gizzard shad, just big bait in general, hence the reason a lot of the basket's so big. This just seems like the perfect storm for Chris Zaldain to be able to pick up, a big swim bait and make it work for 4 days straight. Even if it doesn't, the pre-spawn bite could easily work for him if they get up shallow. Kind of one of those deals like you were mentioning with Lester. I feel like is versatile enough to make whatever need be work. But at the same point, I really like the thought of Zaldain being able to catch him on a swim bait, and I really hope to see that just for entertainment's sake. But I'm going Zaldain in B.
Well, I know based off of his Sunday practice report, and for this week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday's practice, they have an off day again on Wednesday. Some anglers voted on that and wanted it. A lot of anglers, I have had half the field say, who voted for this and wanted it? Well, you were one of the ones who voted in the thing, and it was 2/3 vote that they wanted off days occasionally. And so we're having off day on this Wednesday. So Sunday's practice, though, I saw nothing but videos on Chris Zaldain's Instagram story of guys being stuck, not pros, but just pontoons and other people. It was springtime, and some of those folks around there were like, hey, look, there is water in Lake Chickamauga. I can run anywhere. No, you can't. And they were stuck on some shoals. So no bass picks from Zaldain, but I will say I've seen plenty of action from his Instagram story about Chickamauga's conditions. But I think I'm going to try to be sneaky and time it correctly on this one. Based on some percentages of guys, Taku Ito has 11%, Scott Martin 11%, Luke Palmer is now going to be a very popular figure. You've been beating that drum forever, and now he had a great finish at Santee Cooper, and he's going to be a highly picked person. Jacob Porosnik and Gerald Swindle. All these guys have over 10%, with Swindle having over 24. And then, like you mentioned, Zaldain had over 10% as well. I got to go low percentage, and I think I'm going to time a good comeback event for Micah Frazier. He had a bad event at Santee Cooper, and I told somebody my picks, and he was like, you should pick Mark Frazier. He's the one who's got the hot hand. I'm like, well, they're in the same bucket, and Micah's had just as good of a season, but he did have a bomb at Santee Cooper. But I think that this lines up well, whether it's pre-spawn for him, the style of fishing he likes, or if they do get up there shallow and you can see him, if the water did raise a little bit for some reason, maybe some rain that's coming in later this week, keeps it up a little bit. Maybe those fish will roll into Micah's game plan. But I like Micah Frazier this time of the year. I don't think Micah is necessarily a full-blown sight fisherman. And I think that's why he may have missed the boat at Santee a little bit. I don't think that he's not strapped for bear when it comes to sight fishing beat downs over 100 pounds. But I think that in between, as they transition, is a great spot for him. So Micah Frazier is my bucket B pick. And I think I'm going to go a little different for bucket C. And I'm going to go with one of those guys who's going to keep it honest up shallow, and it's going to be a guy named Bill Lowen. 3% picked. We haven't really heard of him since he won at Pickwick last year, which was around this time of the year. Hadn't really heard of him. Hadn't really heard good finishes from Bill Lowen, but I think that this could be a good one that he turns into a good event, whether he stays in Chickamauga, goes in the Hiwassee River, stays up shallow, or even fishes offshore a little bit, moving baits. I think that Bill Lowen's going to be my sneaky bucket C pick, because we do have a lot of people with good percentages there. Cruz, Fighter, Johnston. You're going to have Livesey taking some percentage because he was the past winner there, even though it was in the fall, and even a Wes Logan at 8%. So I basically was going to pick Matt Herron, Wes Logan, or Bill Lowen. And I like Bill Lowen's percentage and where he's placed at better than the other two. So even though Matt Herron's pretty close as well, I think it's time for Bill Lowen to have another good event.
I agree. And you know, with that being said, maybe not like the offshore Tennessee River style fishing when you think of Bill Lowen, but just really anytime the fish are going to be remotely shallow on a river system, Bill Lowen's definitely going to factor in that event. So you've already mentioned him. And ironically, my train of thought was the exact same with Wes Logan and Matt Herron. So I was thinking I was going to be sneaky and go with Wes Logan. He's actually at 8%, which is not super high, but that's who I'm going with. So I'm kind of the same way that you mentioned. I think Wes Logan and Matt Herron, obviously their styles match up so similarly. Obviously fish the same way on the same bodies of water on the Coosa River. But I'm going Wes Logan. Actually has a good bit of success on Chickamauga, 12th last time we fished there in the Elite Series 2020. And then also in 2017 in Open, more similar time than the 2020 event, finished in 9th. So I actually got a little bit of insider information when I went fishing with Wes on Thursday, and he mentioned that he's fished some BFLs and things of that nature and had a lot of success in the past too. So something about Chickamauga he really likes apparently, and I'm going to go with Wes Logan and bucket C. And also, let me pump the brakes on that too. Insider information was not, hey, I'm going to catch him, because Wes never says he's going to catch him. But
no, he's the worst poor mouther out there.
No doubt.
Poe Mouth and Wes Logan. He ain't no midget of hate or whatever his nickname is. He is the Poe Mouth and Wes Logan. But I will bust you on this one, because we've all got our guys. And everybody's ragged on me over the past few years at Jake Whitaker, and I've laid off that a little bit and been more objective by it. I know Wes is your buddy, so don't get burned by him when he doesn't catch him, though. I know that I've rode that train a little bit, and I got burned a couple times, and so I just don't pick Jake anymore.
The last time we had this conversation was the only other time I picked Wes Logan, and he won the event. So I'm pretty confident that I'm picking him at the right time. I'll say that. So I'm going Wes Logan and C. You want me to go ahead and go to bucket D?
No, I can jump in and do I'll do bucket D, since I made you go back to back earlier. I'll go do bucket D, and I'm gonna go on a pre-spawn, moving bait, cover some water, maybe throw a bigger bait as well. And a guy who put a video out on his Instagram, you may know of it, that said he was losing fish this year uncharacteristically, and those fish better watch out. I'm going to just catch them all. And he said some other expletives that I can't say on here necessarily, or I'd have to change the rating of the podcast, but I'm going Matty Robertson. I think Matty Robertson, Kentucky's finest. He likes the Tennessee River, whether it's the other end of it at Kentucky Lake or Pickwick, Gunnersville, offshore stuff. I think that Matt Robertson might mess around this week and have a good event. And uncharacteristically in bucket D, we'd expect him to have a little bit more flair. He has it off the water, but maybe a little bit more flair on the water this year. A little slacking in that category, but we're still about a third of the way through the season. Good chance to turn it around for Matt Robertson. Whether it is, like you said, with Zaldane, swim baits, because Matt will keep that honest, or cranking, things like that. One thing I know is that the one lake on the Tennessee River, other than maybe Fort Loudon, Tellico, that experiences similar low water, it's a big body of water, but low water in this time of the year, is Kentucky Lake. And him knowing what little bars and shoals and how to fish, and if it's kind of rising, but it hasn't completely gotten full pull, he'll know kind of some of those deals. and not necessarily spots on Chickamauga, because I never pick anglers for spots. I pick anglers that I think that can develop a pattern. And so I think Matt Robertson will be one that can maybe find something and run with it this week at Chickamauga.
I like that pick for sure. Just basically 1% higher than Matt Robertson. I'm going Hunter Shryock in bucket D. So obviously moved to Chickamauga area, probably within the last 2 years, I would say, maybe not even that long, which I like. So if you're too much of a local, you might know too much. But I feel like he hasn't had a chance to how do I put this? To know too much about the lake, but at the same point has had success in some of the opens in the past at Chickamauga. Probably a big part of the reason he moved there. Just one, it's a really cool area. And then also Chickamauga is a pretty good place to call home as far as a home lake goes. But the combination of Shryock being a really good sight fisherman, and then obviously having what seems like in my head, at least, being the right amount of information about Chickamauga. So it's not like he spent his entire life fishing lake, but at the same point has absolutely fished it, obviously a lot since he's moved. So I think that plays into why I like Shryock and bucket D. Also a little, kind of under the radar, 4.5%. That to me already shows he's definitely not super highly pressured or regarded to do well on his home body of water, that kind of thing. So Hunter Shryock kind of seems like he's going to have a little bit of room to lay low, not really be the hometown favorite per se, but seems like that to me would be the perfect storm, having a good bit of knowledge on the fishery, but also not being considered one of the major favorites. Definitely would play out to his benefit.
I like that pick, and I will use that pick later on in my other fantasy picks. But I think that the biggest question about Hunter Shryock this week is, can you pronounce the town that he lives in Tennessee now, on the banks of Lake Chickamauga? I need you to read it off if you can. Easy for me to say. I don't know if it's on the fantasy page, because he wanted me to keep Newcomerstown, Ohio as his hometown, but I think his hometown, or his now current town, is like Ultawa, Tennessee. Ulatolo. I said on the phone with him and he was dying laughing, but it's maybe even another O. It's like OOOLETWAH or something. So I'm just going to say he lives near Lake Chickamauga, but that's going to be the one that we need to say this week. So give me your bucket E pick and then we'll wrap it up for Rapala.
So bucket E, I'm going Ed Lochran. I want to say
we could just wrap it up right now, Kyle, because I picked Ed Lochran too somehow.
we got the same pick in bucket E. To me, it was crazy to see that he was only picked at 1.1%.
I know.
Obviously, did really well here in 2020. I was just telling you before we started the podcast that I had the opportunity to talk to him on the phone right after the Santee Cooper event, because he won the Bass Track contingency prize for the 49th time in a row. But with that being said, we were talking about it. It seemed like he was, he didn't give away too much information or anything like that, but he sounded really excited about it. Kind of liked the fact that the conditions were going to set up the way they were. Seemed, really confident for a guy that, obviously is so even keel, doesn't really get too up or too down about anything. But you could tell he was definitely excited about this tournament. And at 1.1%, I will take that all day long from Ed Lochran.
See, I picked Ed Lochran as well, but I didn't pick him because he got 9th here in 2020. And I'm surprised more people didn't pick him, like you said, because they normally look at the last season's results or the last time we were there and pick him. But I think, even though it's not tidal, I think with the lowering and raising of water temperatures, at times you can lose track of the fish. Now, they may stay stable. It may stay 3 feet high from winter pool, 3 feet low from actual full pool. So it may not matter. But I think that Ed Lochran, having a lot of success and a lot of knowledge about tidal bass and kind of where they go in the in-between, when they're not on the bank and they're not way offshore, when that high tide and low tide fluctuation is, where they're kind of safe at all times. I feel like he'll know where fish are going to be comfortable when it comes to the bars or even in creeks where they'll be and where they'll relate to. So I picked Ed Lochran for that reason. I was going to maybe dabble in a Mark Menendez there, 3%, and I looked it up. He has never fished a Bassmaster event at Chickamauga. He was not on the Elite Series in 2014 because he had his hardship. That was when he was coming off of his wife passing away, and so he took a few years off and then came back. He was not on the Elite Series for Bass Fest that year. Formerly, it was the Texas Fest, formerly known as Bass Fest. Was not here for that. In 2020, he was on the Elite Series, but that was when he cracked his back at Lake Eufaula in practice and did not fish the rest of the 2020 season, and then rejoined us in 2021. So he didn't get to fish the fall stretch, which, to be honest, I think he would have done killer with those 3 events in the fall, just with his fishing style. So Mark Menendez was one I thought about. So if he catches them, do not be surprised. But yeah, bucket E, 1% for our guy, Ed Lochran. And that's because we got Jacob Fouts, who is Bryan College's own Elite Series pro there in Dayton, Tennessee, 10%. Mike Iaconelli still in bucket E, even a third into the season, which is kind of shocking. 13% for him, 16 for Brock Mosley, who should not be in bucket E, and Kyle Welcher, who should not be in bucket E, at 40% as well. So a lot of low percentage guys, because there's 4 or 5 guys who should not be in this bucket that are taking up quite a bit of percentage. So I'll take that gamble with Ed Lochran, and let's just go ahead and address it before we get into Mercury Drain the Lake. But Ronnie, Kyle, you both don't have Buddy Gross or John Cox. How can you doubt their skill at Lake Chickamauga? Give me a reason why you didn't pick Buddy Gross. You may pick him in Drain the Lake, which we'll just make up for in just a couple minutes. But give me a reason why you didn't pick him for bucket A. I believe he was bucket A for Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing.
So the same thing that we've described, or we've tried to explain on this podcast several times. Just because we don't pick somebody doesn't mean that we don't think they're going to do well. But especially Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing, it's all about percentages. That's the only way you make jumps. If I just went and picked the highest percentage guy in every single bucket, there's no way to separate yourself. You're either going to be right with everybody else, or you're going to sink with the ship with everybody else. So the only way you can make jumps in the points is by picking some lower percentage guys. It doesn't mean you have to pick guys that are 0.1% or anything crazy, but you got to take some gambles. So that's why I always try to stay away from the highest percentage guys. And let's be honest, you and I could both go back even just this season when we have picked some of the highest percentage guys in the bucket, and it's burned us bad. So it happened. That I can't give you a scientific reason or a fishing related reason as to why I'm not picking Buddy Gross. If he goes out there and wins the event by 15 pounds, I'm not going to be surprised, but I'm just like taking my odds and rolling the dice with somebody else, because I don't want to pick somebody that's nearly 30% owned, player percentage in that bucket. It just doesn't really do me any good unless I am 1,000% sure that he's going to catch him, like we were 1,000% sure Cliff Prince was going to catch him at Palatka, and it did not.
For the first time ever, yeah.
Literally ever. So
he had a sample size that backed and supported our theory there. But yeah, 100%. I think that this situation would be better for Buddy Gross if the water was completely winter pool. I think if the water was lower and fish going shallow or shallower weren't even, in a factor or a possible factor, I think that he would be much better off as a guarantee to win the event. If it was cooler, let's just say colder water temperatures or colder air temperatures, but I think that he would have benefited from that. And so with it being a little higher, it's kind of not an equalizer, but it's one that's going to kind of take his style and put it against the test of the shallow guys. And I will say this before we transition to Mercury Drain the Lake in just a moment, I wanted to address the elephant in the room when it comes to my household. I asked Sarah, I said, you need to do fantasy fishing picks this year. So, because I said, you're going to have a lot of time on your hands with the baby, so you might as well start picking them before you have the baby, and then you'll just be able to watch your team grow or go low and drop off the face of the earth. And so Sarah is actually beating me in Rapala Fantasy Fishing, her first year playing it, so I feel really good about my teams. She beat me by about 200 points, and that was basically the difference in our Harris chain. Our Harris trained Rapala fantasy fishing teams. I was about 250 points below her. So I've beat her in every single event other than that one. And I just haven't made up that 250 point gap on her yet. So we'll just say that. But then I am beating her by about 150 points in Drain the Lake. But my girl has picked a great roster each event. But I think in Mercury Drain the Lake, she's used up some key guys that I would not have used. And so transitioning into that, we're going to see who we burned this week. And it could be a good burn or a bad burn. If they obviously do well, then we'll take burning some anglers. But I'll go ahead and say it. I used Buddy Gross in my Mercury Drain the Lake, and I went ahead and did Buddy Gross, Kyle Welcher, Hunter Shryock, and Jacob Fouts. I'll say those four are my first four for Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy. I mean, for Mercury Drain the Lake. Buddy Gross, Jacob Fouts, obviously locals to there. Jacob's been there for a lot longer than Hunter Shryock, but Hunter's also now considered a local there. And then Kyle Welcher, he used to fish quite a few tournaments up in this region when he was actually getting his YouTube game started. So those are my four people. I didn't pick them in Rapala, but I picked them in Mercury, and I'll live with that. But I picked quite a few high percentage guys, and I will say for the record, I set my Mercury Drain the Lake for 2022 ahead of the season. Me, Tommy Sanders, Mike Sukon all just challenged each other, and we decided to set our lineups through the whole year beforehand. So I picked these guys thinking that there could be a possible spawn going on or that it could be low, and I've tried to mix in locals and non-locals. So I picked a couple guys. Those were my local guys that have experience here in this group. Buddy Gross, Kyle Welcher, Jacob Fouts, and Hunter Shryock were my first four for Mercury Drain the Lake.
So we can make this really easy because the first four that you just named are also part of my
Good. We're going to tie this week, it looks like.
So those first four that you named, just consider them all on my team because they were all on my team as well.
Okay. So, well, tell me your other four then.
Okay. So I'll pick up the other four. Once again, like I mentioned previously in this podcast, I have saved some heavy hitters and I'm swinging for the fences. I got Jason Christie, Greg Hackney, David Mullins, and Ed Lochran also on my Drain the Lake team.
Dang.
So those are four, yeah. So we're going for it, baby. The fact that I'm at 90% right now, having not used any of those names that I just said, I'm pretty happy with. So I'm feeling pretty good about making a comeback this week. Hopefully that's the case anyways.
Well, I will say, I'm trying to get my camera to focus back in on me. Hey, I'm over here. Hello. I don't know what the deal is, but I will say you did save some guys, but I don't feel bad for using Jason Christie because Jason Christie was my classic guy. He won. So I got triple points for Mercury Drain the Lake for the classic champion. Why am I not in focus? I'm trying to figure this out.
I'll say this much too. Some of the guys I haven't used to this point in the season, I look back and I'm thinking, why did I not use those guys in certain tournaments?
Yeah, exactly.
And hindsight's always 20/20 with fantasy fishing or real fishing in general. But yeah, some of those guys I can't believe I haven't used. But this was kind of the midway point for me, like I mentioned, with this is one of the last true springtime events that we're going to get. Yep. Southern, big line, big rods, possibly big baits, doing that whole ordeal. So I'm like, I got to use my Greg Hackneys, my Jason Christies, and some of these guys before, we get up to the smallmouth swing and that kind of thing where I'm saving a lot of guys for that. And I'm pretty sure everybody is, but yeah, I'm definitely happy to have saved them. But at the same point, few of those guys, I'm like, why did I not use them already? That seems very, very strange. But
I did use Hackney at Santee Cooper last event, and he got a top 10. So that's a positive move there, picking him. So I didn't waste Greg Hackney, but I was afraid of using Jason Christie up at the wrong time. I got him at a good time, so I'll take that. My last four for my team, and like I said, I made my team before the season started. I did not pick this guy because of the hot trend that he's on, but rather just projecting what I thought before the season started. And I picked Caleb Kufall because he fished another tournament actually after the Elite Series event at Chickamauga. He fished like a team championship event that he qualified for from Wisconsin, and he fished that the week later. Did pretty good in that event as well. Had a good, decent showing, I think, in the last Elite that he fished there in the fall. Different time of year, obviously, but I'd expect him to dob some crickets around like he does with his patented hook set. And I was very excited, though, knowing that he's on my team and he utilized a jig and a spinnerbait as much as he did at Santee Cooper. I will take that all day at Chickamauga. I also used Brock Mosley, Skylar Hamilton, and Scott Martin. I did not use Scott Martin in Florida. I think that Scott Martin's probably got a good amount of experience at Chickamauga, whether it's ultimate match fishing, whether it's the FLW tour, whether it's opens. I think that he's got a good amount of experience at Chickamauga, probably this time of the year as well. I will use him for my team this week instead of Florida. Skylar Hamilton, an East Tennessee guy. He will kind of know what the weather's been like. Obviously, you could Google that and look it up, but I think that it's good to have a guy. He's not super close, so I didn't pick him because he was a local, but I do think he probably will do well in his home state. And then, like I mentioned, Mosley and Kufal. I'm really shocked at Mosley's beginning start of the season. A little bit. I know he sucks in Florida. He really does. And he'd say that if we had him on the podcast, that he sucks in Florida. So that's not a surprise that he didn't catch him early on, but he needs to catch him a little bit better to move himself up in AOY standings. So I scooped him up here. I think that he's going to do well. Bladed jig, flipping, whatever it is, maybe even some sight fishing, but I think that Brock's going to excel here. And there was a couple places that you could have picked him. I could pick him at Pickwick, but I do know he'd have much more of an advantage in April last year picking him than he would maybe in the offshore time in the summer, just because of how many people will be graphing around and they're going to find it's hard to hide honey holes nowadays on the ledges offshore. And it's not really his style that much. So I will say I picked him because this is one of the last shallow derbies we're going to have for the spring. We'll have some stuff up north later. So there's our teams. What's your winning weight this week? What do you think? Do we get close to 100 pounds or maybe break it? I had a little bit less than 100 pounds for Santee Cooper because I was worried about the weather, and we ended up breaking it. And Cook and Kufal both broke 100 pounds last time.
You know, I haven't put a whole lot of thought into what I think the weights will be. I put just shy of 90 pounds. I put 88.10 to be the winning weight for fantasy fishing. I always go the route, and we've talked about this before, I always go the route of never putting 100 pounds or better on fantasy fishing because I want it to happen. So it's a reverse psychology thing.
The fish know, obviously you didn't pick it. So yeah.
Right, 100%. So it finally did work at Santee because we did get over 100 pounds. I put like 99.10 or something crazy, just shy of 100. But yeah, I would say upper 80s would be my guess. I don't even think it'll be in the 90s. And if it is, and it's even close to 100, I wouldn't be surprised. But naturally, I think making it last 4 days, and then something you mentioned previously, the potential for fluctuation and a lot of changing, obviously, on the Tennessee River, as we've seen before on Pickwick and other places. You know, the weights can be volatile because things just don't stay the same.
Yeah, I would agree. And that's why I want it to be a tough event. So I put 142 pounds for my winning weight. So that it ends up being 70 pounds for the winning weight. No, I didn't do that. I put 92.6. 92.6 is my winning weight. I think that's a solid amount. I think that that's close enough to 100 to show they caught them and they didn't, drop off at all, or the fishing was bad or whatever. But I think that they will catch them. And I think that a lot of the local tournaments lately that have had poor weights in them, a lot of locals are like, what's wrong with Chickamauga? A lot of them have either had another huge event, like a high school event or a local event going on at the same time. So boat pressure and really steep and sharp winds and weather have kind of affected the winning weights of some local tournaments. So I'd expect that to be different this time of the round with pretty decent, conditions weather-wise. I will check up. Let me look at the weather real quick in Dayton, Tennessee, just because I want to see Dayton, Tennessee 10-day forecast. Let's see what it's going to be.
As you're looking at that, be thinking. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Okay. We've never done this before, but I want you to give me your dark horse pick for the event. The only reason I do that is just because I've got one that I think is going to catch him. And his fantasy fishing percentage was so low, and I get it because of the bucket he was in, but be thinking of that after you look at the forecast.
So I'm going to go ahead and say, if you pick a team for sight fishermen, I'm just going to go ahead and say you're dumb. It's a very dumb decision because it is lows in the mid 30s with highs in the 50s to 60s for the 4 days of the event. The practice, though, is going to be mid 40s for lows, up to 70s for highs. But man, we're going to have cold lows. We're going to have strong winds. We're going to have 12, 17, 11, and 7 for the 4 days of winds, approximately. That changes, obviously. 15 or so percent chance of rain each day. I love how it says mostly sunny, 14% chance of rain, partly cloudy, 24% chance of rain. That's like the same thing, mostly sunny and partly cloudy. That is the same thing. It's just how you look at it, cup half full, cup half empty. But anyways, the weather's not looking great for sight fishing, so that actually will play good into my team a little bit.
Yeah, Friday and Saturday, you're looking at it right now, but the last I had looked, it's never even going to get above the mid 50s, and like you said, the lows are in like 30s. So
yeah, the 260-degree days were day 1 and day 4, and then obviously all 3 days of practice and the off day were good weather days. So we'll see about that. Looking at that now, you need to keep that in mind for spawning fish. But at the end of the day, there will be fish spawning with frost on the trees, because if it's that time, it's that time for them. They got to do it. But I think that this is the first opening, they crack that window open and they might slide in there. It's not wide open and they can come and go as they please. So I think that's interesting. I think it's going to be a pre-spawn bite then. When you talk about a dark horse for doing well this week and maybe winning the event, I honestly like Matt Robertson as one of my picks to possibly do that. I don't know what you're referring to low percentage wise, whether it's drain the lake percentage or not, but I honestly think another guy who could do really well is Jay Shakur. But those are the two guys that I'll think about. And I'm really impressed with Jay. I haven't picked him on my fantasy team yet, but maybe in the coming weeks. But he's doing very well for Rookie of the Year.
Absolutely. So the two that I'll go with, one was in bucket A, hence the reason, like I said, his percentage was so low. But tell me why a Ray Hanselman wouldn't do well in this tournament.
Because he did well in the Harris chain. He's used up his top 3 finish for the year. I'm just kidding. I have no idea.
It's up really, really well. For there to be a pre-spawn bite, big baits, kind of the things that he has been well known for here of his time on the elites. I mean, Ray Hanselman could be a serious factor. Since you gave 2, I'll give another one in Josh Strassner. Rooms with Buddy Gross, travels with him. Obviously has probably fished there a good bit anyways, as it is, not being too far away in central Alabama. But that'd be another one. Super low percentage the last time I had looked. But yeah, I think those 2 guys could do it as well. We ought to keep that up, because I like that. I think there's some merit in having some dark horse guys and seeing if we can actually hit the nail on the head with those guys every once in a while.
Yeah, even if we need to do
fishing, at least makes us look okay, like we kind of know what we're talking about.
I think we need to do that. We need to take the bottom 10 when we're picking our teams. We'll pick out the bottom 10 percentage picked guys, maybe the bottom 15, so a quarter of the field or something, or not a quarter of the field, an eighth of the field. We'll take that, and out of those guys, we have to pick a possible winner and see if we pick them the highest percentage. We'll have to do that next year, because I'm OCD, and if we start in the middle of the year, it would drive me nuts. Yes. But so yeah. Well, hey, Kyle, your fantasy picks, pretty good lineup there. You went swinging for the fences for Mercury Drain the Lake, so you may catch me all in one lump sum this week. I'm liking that it's going to be more pre-spawn than sight fishing. I picked my team according to that. Beforehand, I didn't think that they would full-blown spawn yet. A lot of people were hopeful for April, but I know that is a late April, early May thing where it's really strong for 4 straight days. You can make it happen, mostly because the water level, but also it helps that the temperatures late April, early May are not dipping to the 30s in the evenings, so, and a lot of the rain that we will have would be warmer rain. So that'll do it for episode 71 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. Ronnie Moore, Bassmaster Live here. We'll be doing that for 4 days of this event. I'll be rejoining the crew on the set for Bassmaster Live. We'll have that rolling up Thursday through Sunday, this event. Hopefully, last time we had Santee Cooper, it was Thursday, Friday, Sunday, Monday. Hopefully we don't have anything weather-wise that would prevent us from fishing. Luckily, Chickamauga is pretty narrow in a lot of places. The only thing we always have a concern of is fog. And I've gone and said the F word that you do not say in tournament bass fishing, which is fog. So we will see if that plays a factor. It should not, but we'll see. And 4 days of this tournament, Kyle, you'll be there covering the event, I believe, on the water, taking photos. So we will see what juice you get this week, because Kyle's kind of got the hot hand for photographers. He maybe hasn't gotten the champions, but he's gotten some really good photos of some contenders: Stetson Blaylock, Luke Palmer when it comes to the Classic, Luke Palmer, Caleb Kufall when it comes to the Elite at Santee Cooper. Kyle, I think that, you're coming into your own. You got a hot hand. You're going to say, hey, Bowman, don't put me on the leader, because my guy's going to shine and rise up from the bottom.
I've been super fortunate to this point of the season, for sure. The first 2 events were really, really slow from the standpoint of seeing anything on the water. But yeah, the last 2 events have been really pretty spectacular for having seen some awesome things on the water and just being at the right place at the right time, which that's not me taking credit for that. That's just purely luck. But yeah, it's been fun. So hopefully more of that at Chickamauga this week.
Awesome. Well, we will see you in the next podcast episode, and we'll see you on the water as well. Hopefully a recap next week. Also, hey, before we leave out of here, I'll give a good shout out to Cooper Gallant winning the Open at Cherokee just a few days ago. 2-day event shortened because of high winds on day 1. They postponed that and did full field for the final 2 instead of the first 2 days. Full field for final 2 days, and he outlasted them. Canadian, cool story about Cooper. I met him in 2015 at the high school national championship at Kentucky Lake. He came down from Canada and competed there, so I got to meet little Cooper. He still hasn't grown much, so he's still little, but he's now a grown man, and he almost won the Open last year at the St. Lawrence River. Had a very good shot there of knocking that out with his other Canadian friends. And this week, another Canadian finished third, right behind him, but he was able to out-best Brian New and take the title of Cherokee. Also, kudos to the boys over at Erskine. I don't know how to say Erskine. Is that right? Erskine.
Erskine.
College. I think that was a South Carolina school, and that is they won on Lake Norman. Come back on the final day. It kind of got tough for the leaders, which is crazy. The leaders of that event, Mississippi State, after day 1, they had no practice. They showed up, got in the event, led day 1, dropped off on day 2. They got beat out by Erskine. And those guys were on the wait list for this event as well, and they got in and they win the event. So patience pays off. A lot of long wait lists these days for opens and for college events. Be patient. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. I'm going to leave you with that note. Congrats to our latest champions. Drew Cook, obviously, prior to that, we already said kudos to him, so I can't give him any more kudos than that. Go check out the marathon peak performance video of Drew Cook's win at Santee Cooper. If you want to see Big Bass, that is up on YouTube and our website. Kyle, I'll see you at Chickamauga. Peace.